Hi, it's Nikki Lowe and welcome to the Wisdom for Working Mums podcast show. I'm your host, and for nearly 2 decades now, I've been an executive coach and leadership development consultant. And on this show, I share evidence-based insights from my coaching, leadership and psychological expertise, and inspiring interviews that help women like you to combine your work, life and motherhood in a more successful and sustainable way. Join me and my special guests as we delve into leadership and lifestyle topics for women, empowering you to thrive one conversation at a time. I'm so happy that you're here, and let's get on with today's episode. Welcome to this episode, and today I'm thrilled to welcome Helen Spencer, who's the managing partner of WR Partners. Helen and I met last year at an event her firm hosted on female leadership called Game Changers, and it celebrated the remarkable achievements of women who have made a significant impact in their respective fields. And I was struck by Helen's leadership and the impact she's making in her field. And we've since stayed in touch, and I was delighted when she agreed to join me to share her story and journey with us on the podcast. Helen's firm, WR Partners, employs over 200 people across its offices in Shropshire, Cheshire and Mid and North Wales. And they're a regional accountancy and business advisory firm. But what sets Helen apart from other leaders in her field is not only that she's female, but that she's got a 30-year background in human resources. So she went from people director to managing partner, and that's really uniquely shaped her leadership style. She's not only driven by WR Partners' growth, but she's deeply passionate about her team's well-being. And Helen is still among the minority female leaders in her industry. As of last year, only 15% of top 100 UK accountancy firms are led by female managing partners. And Helen's journey from HR to managing partner is filled with some really valuable insights for us all as female leaders and as working mums, because Helen shares how she's navigated this with 2 daughters. We'll explore how she manages her own work-life balance, what it takes to lead with compassion, and how she supports working parents within her firm. Helen's experience of being a working mum, especially with her children now being adults, offers a refreshing and really wise perspective that I'm excited to share with you. So settle in and get ready to be inspired by Helen's story of leadership, motherhood, and achieving success on your own terms. I won't keep you any longer. Let's dive in and welcome Helen. So welcome, Helen. Thank you so much for joining me for this conversation and for hosting me at your offices, your beautiful offices here. For those that don't know about you and your journey, I would love it if you could talk to us a bit about who you are and what you do now, and give us kind of a brief history of the journey you've gone on to get to this point, if that's okay.
I'm the managing partner of WR Partners. So we are accountants, tax and business advisors. That probably is important for the first thing to say, which is I'm not an accountant. So, we have 200 of us in terms of the team. But my background is very much HR. So I had probably a 30-year career in HR before I moved into this leadership role. So I started actually in a national charity doing HR, and my first opportunity I had in HR, and I had no experience whatsoever, and a lovely lady called Sue Reed, who was recruiting, said she only gave me the job because she liked me. There is a lesson there to be learned, isn't there? Yeah. That despite all the experience that you may have, there is something about that likability factor that actually can get you far. Yeah. So I got married and moved to Shropshire 30 years ago, and I worked for 2 large manufacturing businesses in Telford. Had an amazing time and had some amazing experience, but still very much HR, FMCG. I think part of my story actually is how I came to WR Partners, which was Whittingham Riddell at the time, because I had 2 young children. They were 4 and just fairly newborn, India and Amber. They both had Treacher Collins, so they both had some sort of special needs around it. And the business I was in, it was great, but it just wasn't flexible at all. So I had lots of hospital appointments, and I then would have to make my time up. And the decision I took was actually to put my career on hold. So the decision, I still think this actually, your career is 40 years. And actually the decision I took at that time with my husband was to say, look, I'm going to go and get a part-time job. I need more flexibility with the girls. And then when the girls go to school, I'll restart my career. That actually was the plan. So I came here and thought, well, actually at the time there probably was over 100. Thinking, well, actually, that can't be that hard, can it?
Famous last words, yeah.
Can't be that difficult. And it was 3 days a week, and the managing partner at the time said, well, would you do 4 days because we were likely to get investors in people? I said that was fine. I never went down to 3 days a week, incidentally. I never did. I always worked 4 days, but the flexibility here was great. And then I realised about myself, actually, I'm clearly quite driven, because although the plan was just to come and to effectively just take a back burner, that doesn't sound great for as far as the business is concerned, but just to focus on home for a while.
Yeah.
I've had this amazing career journey here, and I was made a director, as would have been. Then I was made a partner, and then I was made an equity partner. And then 5 years ago, the opportunity was given to become the managing partner. And I would not have believed that was possible, because I didn't see any HR professionals becoming CEOs. Yeah. In fact, I still don't know many HR professionals that have come CEOs. So whilst I often say, you have to see it to believe it, and I don't know where the internal belief came, because it probably isn't always there still. I probably thought, what's the worst that can happen?
Yeah.
I probably thought, well, actually, there's elements of the role that I probably could do. And what I can't do, I can develop. But yes, I still find myself in lots of situations where people still introduce me as, this is the managing partner that isn't the accountant, although she runs an accountancy practice.
Love that. Thank you for taking us on that journey. And your girls are now
20 and 24.
So I know that the kind of insights you're going to share today are going to be so useful, because you've navigated all of that with young children and have kind of come out the other side, although we never stop being a mum.
No, we don't.
And our children never stop needing us, but just in different ways. So I can't wait to kind of hear about those experiences. But as you said, it's quite unique for a HR leader to then step into the MD or the CEO, or in your case, the managing partner role. What do you think your HR background has brought to your leadership?
I think probably a couple of things. So, I've always been a great advocate that ultimately it is your business culture that drives the success of the business.
Yeah.
And because it's the only thing that differentiates businesses. Many of us do the same thing.
Yeah.
It's how we do them, or how we deliver the services that we deliver, that differentiates us. And culture is driven by people. Yeah. So I guess what my HR background has brought is, I'm really focused on, yes, it's that people, or employee experience as we call it, the people management and development. People here will say, that sort of giving really honest feedback, and that's where HR experience. Actually, being able to have those more difficult conversations, it's relatively easy, because that's typically what we have done. Yes. I would say, but also I think more than that, I think when you are in HR, typically you are, well, I would say getting stuff done because you have to influence, because you typically have very little authority.
Yes. Yeah.
So I think the one skill that it absolutely taught me was this influencing skills. And actually, when you were a leader of a business, you do have to influence. I know people think it's often around, well, it must be easy because effectively it must be about you're in command now, we're in control, and actually everybody does what you want them to do. That's not the reality. I think you just have more stakeholders that you're trying to influence. So they're probably the 2 or 3 things I would say is where it's just been so helpful.
And again, really powerful insights. And it's making me think of, I don't know if you've ever come across Kim Scott's work. She wrote a book called Radical Candor. Yes. And that piece about having those difficult conversations, really being truthful but kind. Yes. And I've really heard that from you in the conversations we've had, that you're really good at doing that either it's natural or you've learnt that through your career, the power of doing that.
Yeah, and the word I often use is intention. So that when I'm giving feedback, I'm always really clear, what is my intention in providing that feedback? Because if the individual understands that actually, yes, you've got some difficult feedback to give to them, but your intention is to help them in some way. I want everybody in this organisation to be successful. Yeah. Now, success will look different for everybody, but actually it's not, and I think it's fair, and fair is the word I often use, it's not fair to see people struggle and then not help them. Yeah. Or what is even worse in my mind is I say, no, don't tell me, tell them.
Yes. Yes.
So there's lots of conversations about individuals and their performance, but nobody's actually talking to the individual directly. And I think what my HR background has done is it's meant I'm not afraid to have those difficult conversations. I try and position them always in a way where the feedback is acceptable. Yeah. But sometimes, I also recognise that, it's people, sometimes I'm saying what people don't want to hear. In reality, I've loved my career in HR, and I've had an amazing career, and it has taught me so much, and the different environments I've worked in have taught me so much as well.
And you can hear that in how that's influenced the culture that you've built. That phrase, don't tell me, tell them. Yes. It reminds me about, I was coaching in a utilities company and coached several different managers, and they all talked about a leader, that he used this analogy of a well. And he basically said, look, as a team, we're drinking water out of this well. These are the behaviours that will keep the water clean and purified, but here's the behaviours that will poison our water. And one of those things that they all talked about was, you don't say something behind somebody's back that you haven't already said to their face or wouldn't be willing to. And he really called people out on that, and it really, really made people think about, well, what am I saying about other people, and am I giving the feedback that's needed, or am I just wasting energy on something that I'm not willing to do anything about?
It's a bit of 360 feedback, isn't it? And in fact, we've just gone through a round with our partners of 360 feedback. And one of the things I always say to them is, this is my feedback. This is what I have written.
Yeah, brilliant.
Because otherwise, it's literally rows of sentences. But my view is I shouldn't write something about, nobody should write something unless they are prepared to sit by the side of them or sit in front of them and say, this is what I have written.
Brilliant, I love that. Because often people in 360s go, oh no, who's written that anyway?
It's true.
But owning it, isn't it?
It's true, isn't it? And I won't say anything, about you that I wouldn't say to your face. Yeah. Because again, that creates that culture that just isn't helpful, isn't it? Yeah. Please, I would always say, no, we don't get everything right. And I certainly don't get everything right. But I think it's that, what is my intention? My intention, is to enable people, every single one of our team members to be their best. That's what I want to see happen.
And I imagine that's more rare in your industry, which is typically about numbers. Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all about metrics, isn't it?
Yeah. And I would imagine, as a massive generalisation in your industry, but might be high IQ, but not necessarily always high EQ. And what you're bringing to your culture around, this emotional intelligence is so important for us to be able to operate effectively.
It is. And I talk about outputs and inputs. The reality is, in certainly in my industry, and even probably in some of the internal meetings that I have, there's a great focus on what I call the outputs. So the outputs here is fees, the outputs is profitability. But that is only driven by the inputs. So the inputs are here, it's our employee engagement, because our employees actually drive our client, our client work. And then ultimately it's the client engagement too, isn't it? So it's ensuring that the activity is balanced. Because I say you're not going to improve those outputs unless you really focus on the inputs.
Love that. I know an old boss of mine used to call it, you've got your KPIs, but you've got your, what did he call them, KLIs, so the leading indicators that lead to the performing indicators.
Right.
Yeah, I love that.
Yes. And a question I will often ask in my meetings is about, okay, so how does it feel? That's a very EQ question, isn't it? But we've got to the end of a conversation, so okay, how's everybody feeling now? And I'm not afraid, and I'm probably people here are very used to me asking those feeling questions, because how we feel is absolutely what drives what we do.
Brilliant. And again, I imagine that's a really rare thing to be said. I mean, I know just from kind of my kind of commercial experience how rare that is, but again in this industry as well. And obviously you're a successful female leader, and I'm hoping there's going to come a time where we don't have to put that female leader piece in front. But I know that you've got kind of significant experience of being a woman in a senior position in what I'm imagining is still quite a male-dominated industry. And I wonder what are your insights from kind of that experience?
And it has taken me some time, and it probably is still taking me some time to do this, because I think it's around, I think you have to define your own personal and your own business success. So what is your definition of success versus what others are defining as success? And I've been to those dinners, and effectively everybody's drinking red wine, and then the conversation gets back to what car you drive and your holiday home and your yacht or whatever else is they want to talk about, and it's all quite materialistic. As somebody who likes nice things, so please, I'm not saying the materialistic is wrong, but as a female, I think there's an element of you've got to find the definition of success. Some of that isn't just because you're female, actually. Some of it's around actually what's important to you personally, what your values are. I think I've had to work really hard on my imposter syndrome, if I'm honest. I still sit in those meetings, and particularly, there are people who can be quite noisy, and I can find myself going, oh my goodness me. And I think my takeaway has just been, just keep true to you, keep true to your business, actually define your own success, and it's okay to be different.
Oh, I love that. And you were saying to me earlier about actually even taking on the role as managing partner kind of felt like a stress, and imagine the imposter syndrome kicked off massively at that point, and just being willing to take that risk. It's like, oh, actually this feels uncomfortable, but trusting yourself enough to go, well, I can learn the stuff that I don't yet know, and what's the worst that can happen. And
also, I think there was an element of, clearly I took over from an accountant, I took over from from a male, probably of a different generation too. And I think fairly early on, almost saying, look, it is going to be different. I'm not trying to be somebody else. And I went to an event, and somebody said to me, we've got 4 big shoes to fill. And I hadn't really thought about it like that, because I was thinking, well, actually, I'm not trying to fill somebody else's shoes. I'm just trying to walk in my own shoes.
Yes.
It's probably what I'm thinking. And I have the same conversation here when, if I have new team leaders, I often say, just be yourself. You will have your own strengths. You have your own ways of doing things, and you've just got to be true to you. I'm a huge fan of Brené Brown, and that whole being vulnerable. And I don't know whether I find it easier to be vulnerable because I'm a female. I don't know whether those two things are linked at all. But I am honest and open, and to say, look, this is what's important to me. This is who I am. I'm too old now to try and be somebody else. You just have to recognise. But also, you're sitting in the seat because, in this case, a group of partners at that time believed that I was the right person to sit in the seat. So you've got to take some confidence from that. It's a bit like when you go for a job interview, isn't it? When somebody gives you the job, you've got to take some confidence from the fact that they knew what they were looking for and they saw something in you. And hold on to that.
And as you're talking, what strikes me is you have such a good level of kind of self-awareness. Is that something you've always had? And obviously it develops over time anyway.
I don't know. I would say I've always had a coach. Oh, I'll say always, for a long time. I have had a series of coaches. I have always encouraged feedback. Well, actually, you don't always want the feedback, do you?
Yeah.
I've always encouraged that feedback. I have an amazing husband who is very good at giving me the feedback, and a phrase he will sometimes use is, "I'm going to give you the feedback that you need, not necessarily the feedback that you want."
I love how he sets that up.
It's really well set up. Or even I will sometimes ask the question, okay, is this the feedback that I need or a feedback that I want? So I think that self-awareness just comes, I think, from opening yourself up and having people around you who will challenge you. Equally, I think some of the self-awareness is also surrounding yourself with people who I think you admire, who you respect, who you see something in them, and you have to be really honest with yourself and say, they're really good at that, and I'd like to be as good as that. So I think there's probably a little bit of both, but maybe it comes back to the imposter syndrome, because I think imposter syndrome, there's a positive to it.
Yeah.
Because I think whilst we talk about imposter syndrome sometimes being quite negative, I think it can be positive, because I think what it can mean is you are constantly striving to be better.
Yeah, absolutely. You know that you're not the finished product, and there's always more to learn and evolve, and it gives you the room to do that. Brilliant. So, as a mother, what has that experience been like? Because that's one hell of a career trajectory, really. Yes. Over the kind of, as you said, when you joined here, your daughters were kind of 4.
They were effectively 1 of 5. They would have been. Amma was just 1. India would have been 5 at the time. So yes, India I think was just almost not long off going to school, or just gone to school.
But also you said that they'd got some needs as well that you would kind of trying to accommodate in your working life as well. So would you mind sharing just what that journey's been like?
Probably hard in reality. I don't think anybody with there's 2 parts, but anybody with children will say that actually being a working parent is easy, because it isn't. Yeah. I think that probably is the reality. I think the decision my husband and I took fairly on, as far as the girls were concerned, is we were going to do everything possible to give them a normal life, whatever normal for them looked like. So we probably haven't accommodated massively, because I don't think the world accommodates, and my girls are both partially deaf, so I don't think the world accommodates massively. So I think it was all about giving them those coping mechanisms. I think Edward and I have always managed it as a partnership. So what is amazing for the girls is they have as great a relationship with their dad as they have with their mum.
Brilliant.
And so they have seen, mum does some things and dad does some things, and it's never been about me doing it or Edward doing it. So I think we've shared that. I think the other part of it, and this has only been my own approach, is we've always been very open as a family. There are some things that are non-negotiable. So having dinner, for example, together in the evening was non-negotiable. Yeah. So even from when they were at nursery, they would be sat after the end of nursery in a high chair, and Edward and I would talk about our day. And here they are now at 20, and just gone to America at 24, but here we are all these years later, and we still have dinner together. And, that has been the non-negotiable part. It can be late some evenings, but that's non-negotiable. So I've always been open with them. I also at times have said to them, look, here's some opportunities. So particularly when, I can remember when I had a managing partner that said, look, this opportunity that mum has, but this is what it means for her. Can we as a family decide?
Oh, I love that.
Is that right for us as a family? Equally when they were younger, yes, mum works, this is what it means. And sometimes what it means when they're fairly young is they can have McDonald's whenever they want. Well, they don't quite, but or we have a nice holiday. Is that what you want? Alternatively, mum could reduce her hours, but this is what it would mean. And then the girls have said, oh no, it's okay, mum, we're quite happy. Because, I don't know about your children, but effectively, a lot of my friends, they have worked, so they're friends of working mums, so it becomes the norm. Actually there's that holiday club, and they always went to holiday club. Yes, I would screech up at 6 o'clock after school club, and they'd be there with the bag, and I'm like, yes, I know, sorry. But I've always involved the girls in my career in that way, and been quite open about what I do. Obviously Edward has done the same, but they've been part of some of the decision making. Yeah. The other flip side of it is I have learned to say no. And I think over the years, I've had to say no to the girls as much as I've had to say no to work sometimes. Yeah. So, for example, I'm in India going to gymnastics, and they said, oh, would you like to come 2 days a week? And I said to India, you want to be an Olympic gymnast? She said, no. And I said, you're not going to become an Olympic gymnast, are you? No. Okay. So how about we don't go on a Tuesday and a Thursday? And how about we just continue to go on a Saturday and fun? And at the weekend, you can do whatever you like. And I will take you to swimming and gymnastics. But in the week, Mum can't always do that.
Yeah.
Now, there are things, sports days, assemblies, there are certain things that absolutely I would put them in my diary, so that's where I was going. But I think as a parent, and I guess in the kind of roles that I've had, there has had to be some compromise.
Yeah.
And that compromise has been in both sides.
And you mentioned that you love Brené Brown, and I always remember Brené Brown going that in her family they had to decide very early on, were they going to be children-centred, were they going to be parent-centred, or were they going to be family-centred?
Yes.
And that really formed how they did their decision-making, because if it was for the children, everything was for the benefit of them and everything else got sacrificed, versus, actually we're going to prioritise the parents and the children get sacrificed. And what they did was actually, how do we do what's right for the family by having those conversations to say, Mum and Dad are maxed out with work this week, so you're going to miss gymnastics, or you're going to miss that's right for the family in this moment. We're doing that, and it very sounds like you're very family centric.
Yeah, and I can't have been the only parent. I hope I'm not, who on a Sunday evening has said, please, actually, nobody can be ill this week.
Yeah,
because there's quite a lot going on.
Yeah.
This. Now, clearly, when they are poorly, and grandparents have helped, because I think you have to have a support network as well, don't you?
Yeah.
And of course, the children, the girls have always known. And I asked the girls before I was coming on this, was I always there? I think Amber said to me, when we needed you, Mum, you were always there. Which actually is what you need, don't you? And our children grow into adults. And I've always believed that effectively I should be a role model for the girls as well, because I want them to see it is possible to have a great marriage and a great family and a great career. There is just some compromise at different times that you have to make to achieve it. And the girls are lovely now, and in their own way they will. And when India was at university, I said, you meet some amazing people and some amazing role models. And I remember her saying to me, "But Mum, you're one of my role models." And actually, I thought, oh, that's really sweet, isn't it? Because at times your family get the worst part of you, because they get the tired part, don't they? Or they get the slightly frazzled part, and sometimes work get the not perfection, but they get the polished. That's what I'm looking for. The polished version, don't they? Because you have to, I guess, internalise some of your emotions at times at work, don't you? Particularly when you're in a senior position, people have a certain expectation of you, whereas you can be yourself at home. But yes, I think it's just a balance, and sometimes you get it right and sometimes you get it wrong.
And I'm imagining your girls have grown up to be independent because they've seen you be independent, and as you say, to be able to go, well, actually you're my role model and inspiration, that is like the ultimate accolade. And to also say, we remember you being there when it mattered, because ultimately that's incredibly important.
Because guilt is an emotion we all have, don't we? So I don't know a working parent that doesn't feel guilt. And I have a bucket load of it, like most working mums have. But I think sometimes you've just got to be fair and say, did I do the best I could? And have I, through what I have done, provided some opportunities for the girls? And have I been there when they needed me? I think I can tick those boxes.
Yeah, and it sounds like you did a good job of keeping your guilt in check, in that you kept it functional, but you got rid of the dysfunctional. So the dysfunctional guilt would have been, I should be taking them twice a week to gymnastics. And you were like, no, that really doesn't work. And I'm okay with kind of, as long as that's not going to be something you want to pursue as a career path, that's okay to let that go.
Yeah, if Mindy said she wanted to be an Olympic gymnast, I'm not quite sure what I would have done. Okay, we might have to revisit this. I'm sure I would have made it work.
Yeah. And I'm wondering, we were reflecting before we hit record how far kind of being a mother in the workplace has evolved over the last kind of 20 plus years. And have you always felt comfortable to kind of parent out loud and be that mother that says, actually, I have got a school play and I'm going to it? Or has that evolved in terms of your confidence to do that over that time?
I think it's evolved. I will still reflect on those meetings I've sat in and thought, I've got to go and pick the girls up tonight, and I've got to be left by no later than 20 to 6.
Yeah.
And that probably still go to speed to get there on time. And watching the clock go round.
Yeah. We've all been there.
We've all been there, haven't we, to be honest? Whereas I think it evolved from that to when Amber was at school. And what was really important to me is actually I took Amber to school to saying, no, I'm not coming to one of our offices until 9:30 because I'm dropping Amber off first.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know whether, does that come with seniority or does that come with confidence? I don't know. I would hope that, effectively parents here would feel able to say, actually, I do need to drop my children off to school. That doesn't mean we have all of our meetings later, because there is some compromise. But I think it's twofold. I think it's a confidence. I also think just the working world has moved on massively in the last 20 years. I mean, even maternity, if you think maternity provision, when I had certainly India, 3 months I was back at work. Because I think I can't remember, it's 6 or 18 weeks, I can't remember what it was now, but it was a relatively short time. There was no such thing really as flexible working. I think I told you the story before we started. At the time I was pregnant with India, my manager said, oh, it's a shame you're pregnant, because actually we would have promoted you because she was leaving. And I said, okay, no, that's fine, I understand. Because
that was the norm at that time.
That was the norm at that time. And I think there's been massive developments and progress, as we said earlier.
And you'd also mentioned that probably the most judgment you've had has probably been from other women, other mums.
Yes.
And you mentioned that actually when you went back to work after 3 months, you had comments about that.
And comments around, you shouldn't be here, you should be looking after your children. The same comments about what does that mean in terms of how much time you want to spend. And and actually I think parenting, as much as being a mum, what's right for one family isn't right for another. It's so personal.
Yeah.
It is so personal. And I think often, and I do think, and I will still say this today, I think it's very sad that I think in today's world, I think some mums find, if they want to come back full time, I think they find that quite difficult, not sometimes because of the practicalities around it, but because of other people's views in terms of, and the judgment around it. And my view has always been what's right for one family isn't right for another.
Yes.
Because I do think we are often very judgmental about other people's decisions, and parenting, I think, is one of them.
There's a huge amount of shame that hangs around parenting, isn't there? That can be triggered.
There's a huge amount of shame, isn't there?
Yeah.
I think, as I said, we just need to do what's right for us.
And you mentioned there about kind of the working parents here at WR, and I'm just wondering, how has your background in HR and also your own personal experiences informed how you've created the culture around that? What are the kind of things you do here?
I mean, we have a lot of sort of part-time managers, directors. We've had our first part-time partner appointed, which does seem quite slow in the process, and it probably is. In reality, I think we are still working through how we balance what the individual want is with our clients' expectations. Yeah. The one thing I would say is I think our clients' expectations continue to grow, and we shouldn't. I think we need to be aware of that. And what we're trying to do is to balance the smart working approach that we have, which is as much about where you work as much as when you work. So we do ask everyone's in the office 3 days a week, and balancing that with effectively what our clients need. So I think we do have lots of part-time working. I think I've mentioned, we have the smart working. I think we are getting better, but there's still room to do around, particularly when ladies have been on maternity leave, when they come back into the organisation. 12 months is a long time in business these days. So how are we almost helping them on board back into the business?
Yeah.
I think it's something that we're becoming far more aware of, because there's a very emotional piece that we need to support particularly mums on, but also there's a very practical things will have changed within the business. And I think that there can be a lot of assumptions made about what they're coming back to, and it will be the same, and sometimes it isn't. And emotionally it's a double whammy, isn't it?
Yes.
Because not only they're trying to get used to coming back to work, they're trying to come back into something that's quite different too.
Yeah, absolutely. I always talk about it being one of those vertical development situations where, like, if somebody's promoted, it's a vertical, like their values, their identity may have shifted, and kind of so when somebody's promoted into a known role, that's a vertical development, but also parenthood is a massive vertical development opportunity.
The other thing I do try and listen out a little bit, particularly those sort of some of those that report directly to me who have also got families. So I try and listen out to, if they need to drop off, and I try and make sure they say, sometimes I'll say in a meeting where they need to leave at a certain time, I try and make sure that they can get out of the meeting when they need to, because I know what that feeling is like. It's a horrible feeling, isn't it?
And I think that degree of empathy just makes a huge amount of difference. And I imagine people feel safe to say to you, look, this, I need to do this, and how far that's come. What are some of the other key lessons that you've learned around balancing kind of a senior leadership role with motherhood? It sounds like you've said having that support network's been really important. Yes. Having those honest conversations with your family and internally at work. What about relationships with colleagues, or managing your brand as kind of, I imagine, one of a few female leaders? I remember you telling me a story about when you turned up to go to a conference, and would you mind sharing that story? Yeah, so it's a while back, but I was going to a conference which was it was two nights away, and in fact the partner I was going with, his children had all grown up, and so I came into work. I was coming to a couple of meetings here at Shrewsbury before I was getting in the car. And coming in kind of just before 9 o'clock, their meeting was starting at 9 o'clock, and he was saying to me, you look a bit stressed this morning. Are you okay? And I said, yes, I'm fine. I said, I've just been getting ready, obviously, to go away. And he said, oh, okay. And I roiled off. I said, so far this morning, I have got up. I have put something to eat this evening in the slow cooker. I've made sure the fridge has got what they need in terms of the next 2 days. I've made sure all the girls' school uniform is there, and I have done a drop off, and I have tried to pack my own bag, and I'm here. And he said, oh, my wife packed my bag for me. Okay. So that might be why I look slightly stressed, and you're sitting there looking very calm. Because it is that, isn't it? You're never off duty, are you? I mean, clearly, as the girls are older now, it's very different. But there were lots of things to arrange, lots of things to put in place to make sure some of those opportunities that I have had are possible. As well, but perhaps not always our colleagues have the same. Additional mental load, isn't it? Yes. And also almost the unconscious bias of if you're, I've got a client who is the only female on the board, and she's the only default parent, so her husband works away, and so she is the person that gets called from the school, and just the lack of understanding or appreciation of all that other stuff that she's carrying, that she's actually trying to hide because she doesn't want to be any different, or to be penalised, or felt sorry for in any way, and just trying to hold that.
And I think probably as my reflection for me would be, I think as your children start to grow older, I've got 2 adults now effectively, and so those days seem a long way away when actually, you had nursery drop-offs, or you had sort of pickups. Now I can go home largely when I need to, because everybody in my house is independent. And I think sometimes I do have to kind of just remind myself actually what it was like.
And I think that's also great reflection to go, it's a season in your parenting journey, but a season in your career, that if you can navigate that, then different kind of opportunities and challenges, I imagine, kind of come with a different season. And
I do try and say to particularly some of our sort of female sort of leaders here, your career is 40 years. your children are young for a relatively short space of time in those 40 years. And so sometimes actually the right thing for you and for your family is if I use the word pause, what I mean by that is actually you don't need to kind of go for those promotions all of the time. You can just pause for a while. I became managing partner at 51. Before that, there's lots of other things that I did, and I think often we think we have to achieve so much early in our career, and if that happens, it's fantastic. But lots of females, and you read more and more about this. Females are achieving amazing things in their 40s and their 50s now, aren't they?
Yeah. And just that powerful reflection of actually you feeling like you were dialing back your ambitions to take a part-time role actually was the catalyst for your career trajectory. And I was talking to a woman a couple of weeks ago who she had a very senior job at Dyson, and she now works for another company as a global VP of marketing. And her reflection was, at Dyson they didn't allow directors to work part-time at the time. So when she came back after her second child, she wanted and needed part-time working. So she effectively took a step down. And at the time it felt like catastrophic to her career. But she was like, actually what I learned in that role was a catalyst for a career trajectory that's seen her achieve huge success. So not thinking about it so linear and that we've got to be constantly climbing. And I'm assuming in that it's not accepting that, actually I've got to lean out and I've got to...
No, not at all.
But not beat yourself up about decisions that are right for you in that moment.
And I think in an organisation, certainly such as this, within professional services, we have lots of people at the same level. And I think that you have a certain what I call peer groups. And I think people often think their careers have to develop at the same pace. And the reality is they don't. Now, that's not just purely about being a working mum. I think that's just the reality. It's okay at times to say, look, this is right for me right now. This role is right for me right now. And actually, I'm going to just enjoy this role and perform in this role. And it is performing in the role, I think, that actually gets you those next opportunities anyway. So no, I'm a great advocate of leaning in. I'm a great advocate of actually performing in the role. But equally, what I would say, but go back to, and I work 4 days here, I think when you work part-time, I think you're very focused. I think you have to be, don't you, to be honest? I think you have to be, and I think that you shouldn't underestimate there's other skills that you learn through balancing work and balancing home and commitments and trying to work part-time and trying to achieve what you're achieving in that, in that time. That shouldn't be underestimated.
I heard you say earlier that the ability to say no, and that really establishing those firm boundaries. So many people I hear go, that was something that I had to learn, otherwise I'm being paid for 4, but I'm actually doing 5, and that whole piece. So I wonder, in terms of the career highs and lows you've had, what might be a high and low that stick out for you?
I'll do the low first, because I like to finish positively. I think the low, and when I reflect now, I think it was when I was in that stage where the girls were both very young and I was in an environment that really wasn't family friendly, and I was putting them to bed and going back into the factories 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So and just feeling totally overwhelmed with actually just what I had to do, and I was still trying to be this amazing employee and this amazing wife and this amazing mum, and there just was nothing left for me in all of that. And I think that I can remember being a real low, actually, and it wasn't in the first 2, 3, 4 weeks I'd returned. It was a little bit. It was further down. It was further down the road when I suddenly realised this kind of was it.
Yeah, it doesn't get easier.
It doesn't get easier. It's not me just transitioning into something. It wasn't going to get easier, and it was a low in the sense of I didn't want to. I felt a little bit like I was failing at something. I felt that I perhaps wasn't achieving what I could achieve. So I think that probably was what I would class as a low. It turned out not to be, because clearly we've already spoken about that. But I think that would have been a low. And
I really appreciate you sharing that, because I know I can completely relate to that, and I know so many of my listeners will be as well, because often when women approach me for support, it's not returning from maternity leave, it's 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 years down the line when they're going, the relentless responsibility, and nobody's coming to rescue me from this. Like, I've got to find a way through it, because nobody's going to come and just make it easier. I've got to find a way. So I really, really appreciate you sharing that.
And I think particularly if you go back into work and then you just continue as you were before, what everybody's seeing is, oh, but she's in control, it's great, and she's back and she can do all of these things. And you're trying really hard on you to be like you were before, but you're not.
Yeah.
But the pressures are not the same.
Yeah.
So I think that was a low. I think the high probably has got to be becoming managing partner. I think it's probably got to be, hasn't it? To be to be honest. And it's not the title. I think it's the opportunity that being managing partner has given me, the opportunity to, I think, develop a business, to the opportunity to gain some amazing experience. I still sit in my chair going, oh no, and I think I've met great people, but also being able to work with a great team here. Yeah. I think that's got to be the high.
Oh, I love that. Thank you. And so, just very quickly, looking ahead, what is your kind of plans or hopes for the future of WR Partners?
I'm hugely ambitious for us. So, I would like to see the organisation grow, and that's about the opportunity I've always believed that growth will provide. I would love to see more female partners. I would love to see some of the people who have been here a long time continue to develop their careers in the way in which they would want to, and they would hope to. But I think probably also hope is that as an organisation that we stay relevant for our clients. Yeah. That as we continue to develop the services that we provide to our clients, we're helping our clients realise their dreams and ambitions in the same way. That's what we're doing internally for our teams.
Oh, I love that. And I have no doubt, honestly, that under your leadership that the future's really bright. Because I know you've just gone through an acquisition, so you are growing kind of literally and, within your client base as well. So that's lovely, and I wish you every success with it. So if there's just kind of one thing that you want to leave anybody listening from this conversation with, what would you want that to be?
I would say be kind to yourself.
I just felt like a big hug, Helen, because I think and to come from somebody that's achieved so much and is still so ambitious, is recognising kind of that self-compassion goes a long way along the way.
Yes, just be kind. I think recognising that whatever you're doing your best, and you can do no more.
Fantastic. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
If you've enjoyed this episode of Wisdom for Working Mums, please share it on social media and with your friends and family. I'd love to connect with you too, so if you head over to wisdomforworkingmums.co.uk, you'll find a link on how to do this. And if you love the show and really want to support it, please go to iTunes, write a review and subscribe. You'll be helping another working mum find this resource too. Thanks so much for listening.